Revenge isn't always fire. Sometimes it's ice. You don't raise your voice. You don't break your composure. You simply stop letting people drink from the parts of you they never deserved. And that's when everything begins to shift. Because here's the cruel truth. Power doesn't move with emotion. It moves with intention. And no one understood this better than the man whose name became a synonym for strategy itself, Machiavelli. But today, this isn't about history. This is about you. You who has trusted too quickly. You who has loved too deeply. You who has forgiven the kind of people who never deserved access to your softness in the first place. And that's exactly why this story begins in silence. The silence before the strike. Most people think mind games begin with words. They don't. They begin with the quiet shift inside you. The moment you decide you're done letting others write your story. That moment when you stop explaining yourself. When you stop hoping they will finally understand. When you stop bleeding to keep the peace. It's in that stillness that your mind awakens to a truth Machiavelli understood better than anyone. He who is feared controls outcomes. He who is loved controls nothing but fantasies. But fear isn't always terror. Sometimes fear is just the realization that you can walk away, and they can't. And that's the first dark strategy. Control is never taken. Control is granted. People hand it to you every time they depend on your reactions. Every time they wait for your approval. Every time they expect you to break first. What they don't tell you is, the strongest move you will ever make is refusing to play the role they scripted for you. The mind game they never see coming. You've probably noticed something. People don't betray you suddenly. They betray you quietly. Through patterns, not moments. It starts with a small lie. A subtle shift in tone. A promise they never intended to keep. But the real betrayal? It's how they expect you not to notice. They think your softness makes you blind. They think your kindness makes you weak. They think your trust is a currency they can burn without consequence. And that's where Machiavelli enters the story, not as a philosopher, but as a warning. Because if there's one thing he understood, it's this. The greatest danger is not the enemy in front of you, but the ally who envies you in silence. Most people miss the envy. They miss the resentment. They miss the subtle shifts in energy until the damage is already done. You didn't miss it. You just tried to rationalize it. You tried to give them the benefit of the doubt. But here's the truth you never wanted to say out loud. You saw the betrayal coming long before it arrived. You just ignored your instincts. That's where the next strategy begins. Stop ignoring the signals your subconscious has been screaming for months. Because manipulation isn't magic. It's pattern recognition. And you were never bad at recognizing patterns. You were just too human, too hopeful, too forgiving. But hope without boundaries becomes a weapon others learn to use against you. The power of being underestimated. You ever wonder why manipulators target people like you? It's not because you're weak. It's because you're powerful in a way that terrifies them. Your empathy makes you dangerous. Your silence makes you unpredictable. Your loyalty makes you irreplaceable. And nothing scares a manipulator more than someone who can read their intentions without saying a word. That's why they try to guilt you, why they play the victim, why they pretend to misunderstand. Because once they can't control you emotionally, they lose access to the only power they ever had. Machiavelli wrote, "Men forget the death of their father sooner than the loss of their inheritance." What he meant is simple. People are more terrified of losing access to you than losing anything else. Your time, your attention, your care, your presence. You were the inheritance they took for granted, and now they sense the shift. And that's when the mask finally falls. The dark strategy of strategic stillness. Here's the part most people never understand. Power doesn't require aggression. It requires observation. The one who watches controls the one who speaks. The one who waits controls the one who rushes. The one who feels nothing controls the one who feels too much. Strategic stillness isn't detachment. It's redirection. It's the moment you observe without absorbing. When someone tries to provoke you, and you don't react. When they try to guilt you and you don't bend. When they try to confuse you, and you don't crumble. They don't know what to do with that version of you. Because here's the brutal truth. Manipulators don't fear strength. They fear clarity. The moment you see their game, the moment you stop giving emotional responses, the moment you stop taking their words personally, you become untouchable. Not cold, not cruel, not heartless, just sovereign. And sovereignty is the one thing no manipulator can survive. The shift inside you. You felt it, haven't you? That quiet evolution. That slow rise of awareness. That strange sense of calm when you finally stop over-explaining yourself. Most people think awakening feels like fire, but yours feels like frost. Steady, silent, disciplined. This is where the transformation begins. You are no longer trying to be understood. You are studying. Studying motives. Studying reactions. Studying the patterns people try so hard to hide. Because when you understand this, everything changes. People reveal their loyalty in your absence. People reveal their respect in your silence. People reveal their truth when they think you're no longer paying attention. That's the paradox Machiavelli mastered. You gain the most control when you remove the illusion that you need any. The anatomy of guilt, the manipulator's favorite weapon. Here's the part no one warns you about. Guilt is the softest knife and the deepest cut. It never arrives in a shout. It arrives in a sigh, a subtle drop of the shoulders, a quiet, calculated look that carries the message. You disappointed me. They don't accuse you directly, that would expose the game. Instead, they wrap the accusation in vulnerability. They speak in half-finished sentences. They end every complaint with, "But it's fine, I guess." And suddenly, you're the one apologizing for things you didn't do. You're over-explaining your intentions. You're seeking reassurance from the very person who created the storm. That's how guilt works when someone uses it with precision. It turns your empathy against you. It rewires your instincts. It makes you defend yourself for crimes that only existed in their imagination. Machiavelli understood guilt far before psychology named it. Men are driven by two primary forces, fear and desire. And guilt? It weaponizes both. Guilt makes you fear losing the connection. Guilt makes you desire their approval again. That's why manipulators love empathetic people. Because empathy without boundaries becomes self-sabotage. But now you're learning. You're seeing the structure beneath the sentiment. You're recognizing that guilt isn't a reflection of what you did. It's a reflection of what they wanted. And here's the cruel truth most people never dare to say out loud. People only try to control you with guilt because shame doesn't work on them. The shift from reaction to observation. There is a turning point in every psychological awakening. A moment where you stop drowning in other people's emotions and start quietly studying the angles they thought you'd never see. The moment you stop reacting is the moment you start winning. Take a breath and think back. How many times did someone provoke you just to measure your loyalty? How many times did they create conflict only to test how quickly you'd crawl toward peace? How many times did they do something unforgivable and then judge how long you needed to forgive them? That's not a relationship. That's an evaluation. Most people never notice they're being tested until it's too late. But you've begun to notice. You've started catching the patterns. You've started recognizing the questions hidden inside their behaviors. Will you break? Will you chase? Will you bend? Will you forget? Every manipulator asks these silently, because your reaction gives them the blueprint to control you. But now you're shifting. Your reactions aren't automatic. Your emotions aren't public property. Your silence isn't surrender. It's strategy. That's when the dynamic changes. That's when they realize the version of you they manipulated no longer exists. And few things terrify a manipulator more than a person who no longer gives predictable responses. The reverse game, strategic kindness. Here's something Machiavelli understood, but most people misinterpret. Kindness isn't weakness. Kindness is camouflage. You weren't naive when you loved them. You weren't foolish when you trusted them. You weren't blind when you gave them the benefit of the doubt. You were observing. You were learning their desires, their fears, their insecurities, their masks. Kindness gives you access to people's unguarded selves. Cruelty shuts doors. But compassion, even strategic compassion, opens their entire psychology to you. They confess more. They reveal their intentions without realizing it. They abandon their defensive walls. They speak in comfort instead of strategy. And when the moment comes, you will know exactly where their weaknesses live. Because what they don't tell you is this: power doesn't come from knowing people's strengths. It comes from seeing the fractures they hide behind charm. Your kindness wasn't a mistake. It was reconnaissance. And now that intel belongs to you, not them. The art of withdrawal. A Machiavellian reversal. Machiavelli believed the most dangerous moment in any power dynamic is the moment you realize you can walk away. Not because departure is loud, but because departure is final. Most people think leaving is the last step. It's not. Leaving is the reveal, the final act of a strategy that started long before the exit. The real power move is the withdrawal of emotional energy. While you are still physically present. You felt this, haven't you? When you sit across from someone, and the version of you they once controlled has grown silent, distant, unshakable. When their jokes no longer affect you. When their words no longer cut you. When their silence no longer scares you. That's the reversal. You're no longer performing for them. You're no longer negotiating your worth. You're no longer trying to be enough. And that's when they panic. Quietly, invisibly, desperately. Because the one thing manipulators cannot recover from is this: your indifference. Indifference is the final severing of their influence. It is the collapse of the emotional bridge they depended on. It is the moment your power becomes self-contained, rather than borrowed or negotiated. You aren't punishing them. You aren't teaching them a lesson. You're reclaiming what was always yours: your emotional independence. And emotional independence is the death of manipulation. The mask of empathy, and why it breaks them. They underestimated you because you were gentle. They didn't realize gentleness is a controlled power, not an absence of it. You mirror emotions with precision. You read microbehaviors instinctively. You sense shifts in energy before words confirm them. What they thought was softness was your ability to perceive what others cannot. Empaths have a unique advantage. They understand the hidden selves of others, long before others understand themselves. Manipulators fear this, because they cannot manipulate someone who sees the shadow behind the smile. Your empathy was never their advantage. It was yours. And the moment you stop trying to fix them, to soothe them, to justify them, you weaponize clarity. That's the moment the game ends. Not because you destroy them, but because you finally stop letting them write the rules. The psychology of regret, and why it shapes every power game. Regret is a strange creature. It doesn't arrive at the beginning of a mistake. It arrives long after the damage is done. It comes when the silence is too loud, when the truth becomes undeniable, when the person who once tolerated everything finally stops tolerating anything. Most people don't fear losing you. They fear the moment they realize you're no longer available to be lost. Psychologically, regret forms in 3 phases. 1. Recognition, they finally understand what you gave. 2. Reversal fantasy, they imagine how they could get you back. 3. Collapse, they realize there is no return. But the cruel twist is this: regret is born not in your absence, but in your evolution. They don't regret what they did. They regret who you became because of it. Regret is Machiavelli's silent punishment. Not vengeance through fire, but vengeance through transformation. You didn't fight them. You outgrew them. And that is a defeat no apology can undo. The seduction of dominance. Why power feels like gravity. Let's be honest. Power doesn't feel like arrogance. It feels like clarity. It feels like finally seeing through the tricks that once twisted your emotions into knots. It feels like understanding the motives behind words that used to confuse you. It feels like being able to predict someone's behavior before they even choose it. Humans are drawn to dominance not because it's cruel, but because dominance eliminates uncertainty. Uncertainty is the real prison. Not manipulation. Not betrayal. Not heartbreak. Uncertainty, the feeling of waiting, guessing, hoping, doubting. Dominance dissolves that. Dominance says, I know what you're doing. I know why you're doing it. And I won't dance to that rhythm anymore. That level of psychological seeing is the core of every Machiavellian strategy. Because once you understand intention, you no longer suffer from illusion. And once illusion dies, you become unpredictable. And unpredictability is the ultimate form of power. The rare art of emotional sovereignty. Most people live in emotional debt. They borrow validation from others. They borrow approval, acceptance, attention. And debt creates dependence. Dependence creates vulnerability. You learned this the hard way. You gave too much. You forgave too often. You trusted beyond logic. But something shifted. A quiet inner discipline began forming. You stopped explaining yourself to people who only understood chaos. You stopped negotiating your needs with people who never met their own. You stopped breaking yourself to keep the connection intact. That's when emotional sovereignty was born. Sovereignty isn't coldness. It's self-rule. It's reclaiming your emotional center, so no one else sits on its throne. Psychologists call it internal locus of control. Machiavelli called it self-governance. In the language of the modern world, simply means no one gets to decide how you feel but you. Not their moods, not their silence, not their tantrums, not their unpredictability. Your emotions belong to you, and the moment you reclaim them, every manipulator loses their anchor. When you stop chasing, they start explaining. Think back. There was a time when you were the one explaining everything. Why you cared, why you tried, why you stayed, why you forgave them again and again. But explanation is a powerless posture. And manipulators loved you explaining, because it meant you were still invested. But now your silence is a mirror. They must confront the version of themselves that your absence reveals. When you stop chasing, something interesting happens. The guilt they used against you turns inward. The manipulative tactics they relied upon lose their effect. The control they once had evaporates, and suddenly, they're the one replaying conversations at 3 a.m. They're the one overthinking your silence. They're the one wondering if they push too far. Because the harsh truth is this: you were never hard to love. They were just too weak to handle someone honest. And now, honesty is all they have left. Their own. The shadow self. The part of you that saved you. Every human carries a shadow. Not the dark, monstrous thing people fear, but the part of you that protects you. When your light becomes too costly to maintain, your shadow is where your boundaries live. Your instincts, your warnings, your clarity. You ignored that side for too long. You silenced it to keep the peace. You softened it to avoid conflict. You buried it to protect people who would never have protected you. But your shadow was never the enemy. It was the survivor, the guardian, the quiet intelligence beneath your kindness. Machiavelli believed humans are dual beings, half light, half strategy. The tragedy is that you lived in the light too long. But the victory? You finally found your strategy. Your shadow didn't harden you, completed you, and now the balance makes you unstoppable. The final ascension, becoming unmanipulable. There is a moment in every journey when you stop looking at people as who they pretend to be and start seeing them for who they are. That moment is your ascension. Manipulators lose interest because you no longer react. Users lose access because you no longer give. Pretenders lose influence because you no longer believe. You have outgrown the games that once held you hostage. You see through the masks that once impressed you. You interpret silence that once confused you. You recognize guilt that once controlled you. That is the evolution Machiavelli spoke of, the rise from emotional chaos to psychological dominion. And here's the final truth. You were always meant to learn. Power isn't about controlling others. Power is about never allowing others to control you. Because control isn't taken by force. It's taken by silence, by clarity, by the refusal to be swayed, by anything less than truth. And that's when you stop being kind and start being powerful.